Hi, I'm Andy from EasyRing. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about leadership in next stage organisations and indeed leadership that can create next stage organisations. So humans are weird, right? Some of our behaviour isn't that reasonable, isn't that rational, and there's a simple reason for that. We're not perfectly rational creatures. We're bundles of needs and strengths and emotions and beliefs and values and circumstance, and all of those things come together in a way that means sometimes we behave perfectly reasonably and sometimes we behave perfectly unreasonably. And I think that's an important thing for us to be able to reconcile in our modes of leadership and in how we behave together as colleagues. We're not these perfectly consistent beings, and we need to be able to cope with that variety if we're to succeed in life and in our organisations. So I want to explore that with you with a game. So on screen just now you can see 4 boxes, and these 4 boxes each relate to different parenting strategies. The game I want to play, and this is where it gets weird, is I'm going to be dad, you're going to be my children, and I want you to think about how you would behave in response to these different parenting strategies if I adopted them. So in the top left box, you live under my roof, you follow my rules. My job is to set the rules, your job is to follow them. I don't need to hear your opinion about the rules, I just need to see you following them. How would you behave in response to that sort of parenting? If you want to play the game, pause the video. Otherwise, here's what the research says. No surprises here. You're going to kick back. You might subvert the rule by, for instance, following it slavishly right in front of me, even when you know it's in an environment where I didn't intend it to be applied. And then you turn to me and say, "See, Dad, I told you." Or, "I don't know what you're on about, Dad. I'm only doing what you told me to do." The other behaviour there, unthinking compliance, I think starts to bridge from the example of parenting I'm using into the example of leadership in organisations. When we behave in authoritarian, autocratic sort of way as a leader, we can risk creating unthinking compliance. So this is people following the rule because it's the rule, not because it's the right thing to do. That way lies risk, but also that way lies just a fundamentally unhelpful attitude. It's where the computer says no approach to customer service arises from. It's where the jobs worth attitude to each other comes from. And it's something that ultimately shows that parenting strategy, one, doesn't work for kids, doesn't work for parents, and by analogy to leadership, it really doesn't work as a leadership strategy either. Into the bottom left box then for parenting strategy 2. So I'm still not interested in your opinion. But that's because generally in life I'm not really interested. I don't give much of a damn about anything. I'm just kind of getting by, and I'd wish you'd just get by too and stop bothering me. So low respect, low rules. How are you going to behave towards me in that environment? If you want, pause the video. Otherwise, here's what the research says. Behaviour is reciprocal. What you give out, you get back. It's not always a direct mirror, but there's always a relationship there. So a child raised by a parent who frankly doesn't give a damn about them or about life in general is likely to raise a kid that doesn't give a damn about themselves and about the world around them. Of course, behaviour is sort of probabilistic as well as being reciprocal. So there are always those few percent who might respond to the environment I've just described by saying, you know what, I am worth something and I'm going to show the world that I'm worth something. They may become a stellar success, not in spite of their environment, but because of it. But that's the few percent. So what we're talking about here is if we want action strategies, whether it's as parents or whether it's as leaders, that bring the best out of people systematically at scale, that optimises their chance of success and of creating the sorts of behaviour and performance we want, then the first 2 action strategies are, put bluntly, duds. Let's go to the next box then. Action strategy 3 is in the bottom right corner. Here, you're the apple of my eye. I just love you. I love everything you do. You can't do any wrong, which is why we don't need any rules. Or if we have rules, I sure as hell won't enforce them because I wouldn't want to upset my little darling, would I? If you're a child raised in that way, pause the video if you want to play along. Otherwise, here's what the research tells us. Bluntly, it tells us that you're a boiled sprat. You're entitled. You may well be lazy. In other words, why would you try when actually trying doesn't get you anything extra? You're getting all the love and respect and support and everything that you need, so lap it up, folks. In organisations, though, this also creates some really interesting dynamics, I think. Not just the entitlement factor, but also praise junkies, reward junkies, people that do things in order to get praise, not because they're the right thing to do. Those people are dangerous, bluntly. In an environment where what we seek is external approval, what we do is we limit challenge. We run the risk of creating organisations populated with fake news that keep those that are trying to run them blind from the reality of what's going on, potentially steering their organisation over a cliff without even knowing, while everyone tells them that they've got the best ideas since sliced bread. I saw something similar actually in an organisation I was working with recently. They were saying that they had a talent management program they wanted to improve, and that they had a real problem with their talent because what they'd observed was, since setting up the program, the people that they once thought were the best have actually become, in a sense, the biggest problem for the organisation. So we unpicked a bit of the history, and what came to life was this bottom right box. Essentially, they'd taken their most productive, most innovative, most resilient people who were ready to challenge, and about 3 or 4 years before, they put a badge on their chest saying, "You're special." And then, as part of the talent management program, they'd systematically reinforced the message that you're special, month in, month out, week in, week out, for years. For many in that cohort, what happened is they'd become absolutely dependent on praise. Their behaviours had gone from being resilient, independent, self-starting, challenging, to being desirous of external approval, ready to be yes men and women to whoever was the next one up the hierarchy for them, always looking to optimise their position relative to someone in power, rather than looking to do the right thing. Now, it might seem extraordinary to you that behaviour in adults can change in that way, but we know this. We know that environment conditions behaviour, and the environment that this organisation had created for what were once its most talented people was one which had essentially turned them into organisational spoiled brats. So, action strategy 3 is also a dud. Let's get into the top right box and hope for good news, otherwise we might as well go home. So, if you're still playing along, pause the video and think about, how would you behave if I were dad, you were my kids, and how I approached you was like this. Alright, look, we need some rules of the road. If we're going to have a happy life, we're going to get on together, we're going to function well in this household, we need to have some rules that kind of keep things going. However, those rules are going to be based on mutual respect. Those rules are going to be about working in a way, living in a way that means that we all win together. It's not about me over you or you over me, it's about getting along. And we might co-create some of those rules, but what we can guarantee is whatever the rules are, they're developed from a desire to be mutual. How might you behave? Well, here's what the research says again. So in those environments, responsibility flourishes. We create people who don't just follow the rules, but understand the spirit of the rules and the rationale for the rules. And because they understand the rationale, put in new environments where we don't have rules for them, or environments where we think we have rules for them, but actually there's a nuance to the context. People are able to actually show initiative, think, reason, and take responsibility. And the reason they're able to do that is, in these environments, what happens is we nurture habits for and strengths in being empathetic. In other words, we create in each other the capability to understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. Also, we create the capability to understand what it's like to be in our own shoes, to really actually get hold of our own needs and strengths, and therefore not to be a doormat, but rather to be a responsible adult. And that's why, in presenting this framework, I don't feel embarrassed about drawing a parallel between parenting and leadership. Where leadership might be all about adult to adult relationships, the traditional view of parent-child, I think, is unhelpful, because parent-child in this top right box looks very much like a responsible, mature relationship. And yes, of course, as the adult, one might need to be taking the lead in that. Just as the formal leader in an organisation paid the big money, you might need to be taking the lead in that. But because behaviour is reciprocal, what you're doing by showing respect and treating someone as mature is you're encouraging them to be respectful and mature in response. So empathy is absolutely key here, and I think what we can do usefully with our children is help them to acquire habits and skills in empathy. And what we can do as leaders, or indeed as any colleague in an organisation, is exactly the same. So let's jump over to the organisational environment. And to do that, I think we just need to reframe the axis slightly. And so along the bottom, how I would suggest we think about this is that getting into the top right box is about caring for each other's needs and strengths. We can accept that the world's big and messy and complex, and our organisation may be huge. We can accept that that might mean at times we can't meet every last need and every last strength of every last colleague, customer, stakeholder. But that's not the point. The point is that by systematically giving a damn about whether we're able to act from mutuality, by systematically empathising with each other's needs and strengths and trying to find ways to win together, people are very well able to differentiate the specific from the general. They can understand that I may not be winning in this instance, but I am winning in general, because what we do around here is win together. And in order to do that, what we need to do is make it completely normal to discuss what good looks like. It's by acquiring those habits and putting in place those processes and rituals around shared sense making that we invite challenge, we invite each other to come forward and turn up, and we create the opportunity to demonstrate that we're being mutual and that we care about each other's needs and strengths, including, by the way, the needs and strengths of the institution. Back to that idea of empathy. Skilled empathy looks like putting ourselves in the shoes of others, and therefore, when we turn up to talk about what good looks like, it's not just what good looks like to me, but it's what good looks like to the bottom line, to the regulator, to the customer, to the colleagues. And through doing that, we really create the potential for adult to adult relationships, and relationships where it's possible to devolve control and expect responsibility in return. So I want to offer you two definitions that I think bring this together, because what I've been talking about really is fellowship more than leadership. And that's on purpose. I think leadership really relies on fellowship rather than followership to operate. And fellowship relies on leadership to come forward. So my view of leadership is that it happens when someone, anyone, ensures that what really matters is what really matters here. So in a meeting where we're tied up in procedure and getting lost in the weeds, someone who comes forward and says, hang on, can we remind ourselves what the mission is? Who's the customer? What does value look like? They're demonstrating leadership, whether they're on the lowest rung of the ladder in terms of the pay scale or whether they're being paid the big bucks. So leadership is a behaviour rather than a role. And when we demonstrate that leadership, we need to do it with fellowship in mind. In other words, when we represent what really matters, we need to remember that within that, what really matters is what really matters to each other, because otherwise we guarantee conflict. It's no use saying, let's remember the customer, unless we also remember each other. So the customer may be king or queen, but unless we can find ways to create ways of working that allow us to win together whilst helping our customers to win, then you can guarantee that things will go south fast. So all of this, from my point of view, means one simple thing, which is that the first primary job of leadership in organisations that want to get to the next stage and stay there is we have to grow fellowship. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. And until next time, thanks for watching.